So, just going to externalize another experience. Very interesting one. I felt the brainwashing happening through Liberty University. They're not the only ones. It's not like, oh, well, because the secularists are doing, marijuana and LGBT and all this globalist, global elite, wealthy, and powerful agendas implemented into my country that my family has been in since 1608. There's some sort of opposition. Therefore, Christianity is the opposition to secularism. Oh no, Christianity failed. They also push marijuana and LGBT. So therefore, Judaism or Islam or no, everything's been infiltrated. Everything's just tools for the rich to control the poor. Can't even find a decent cult these days that's marijuana free. So I could feel the brainwashing happening. I'm just gonna cite some observations here. So in Liberty University, they kept saying the human race. This is a very psychologically manipulative term. This goes against science. There is a lot of science on race, the scientific, documented observational differences between race, genetics. There isn't one race, the human race. So Christians are obviously brainwashed morons. However, in the Art Scroll Siddur Tanakh, they also say the human race, which is weird because the seed of Abraham is very distinct from everyone else. It's set aside, selected, chosen. So it's not meant to blur the lines of distinction between Jew and Gentile. It's very specific about that. So even Judaism is also a social control mechanism. But the rabbis in the conversion class were trying to brainwash me to be accepting of medical marijuana legalization, which is a Trojan horse for marijuana legalization, despite all the tangible harms that has caused, both medical, legal, decriminalized, even the CBD hemp extracts. Yeah, the 4-year-old kid was killed by CBD gummies in Virginia. That is a harm caused by CBD, caused by hemp. No, just ignore the bad things the marijuana is causing. That was the sort of brainwashing they were doing. And because of my experience with psychology and manipulation and deception, because so many people in my life have been manipulative and deceptive towards me, that learning psychology has made me realize that they were doing these things. Like Susha Sauer, for example, my ex, she strategically places herself in a position of trust in order to manipulate from a position of trust to greater profit for her at greater expense to those who trust her, thus are manipulated by her. But I also listened randomly again to the beginning of Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, right? Industrial Society and its Consequences. And he says the human race. It's very weird. Anyway, so Liberty University. Taking 2 courses right now, Criminal Justice, which is just pure woke garbage. It was really cool at first. This is relevant to the timeline analysis because they actually cite. So, in my timeline analysis, this is the fun part about it that I want to do. When you recover memories, you can pause time, right? Like, for me, a big turning point in my life was in the 5th grade. I had scored gifted, was eligible for grants in private school with my test scores. My dad got his degree in philosophy, couldn't afford to feed and house himself, let alone me. So he basically just threw my life away. He had the opportunity to take custody. The school had a meeting with my parents and told them I was gifted, and my parents had a meeting after that. They said I was eligible for grants in private school. I was present at that meeting, so I remember. It's amazing what memories you can recover with these, techniques. Anyway, my dad and mom had a meeting after that where they discussed my dad taking custody, and my dad couldn't do it because he could hardly afford to feed and house himself, let alone me. And they both knew if they didn't get me out of the house and away from my older gang member brother, that I had no chance in the future. And when I go back into that memory, I'm at this house in Bernalillo on Maple Street, a duplex. And, you look at specific stimulus in the environment. So when was the television? There was a channel called The Box. It was competition for MTV, where you could call in, you pay like $1, and they play your music video. And it was all rap music. They had dancing prostitutes in nothing but nipple pasties and G-strings. And I saw that on television at 10 years old. Why was that allowed on public television? Sir Mix-a-Lot, right? And so many others. And Snoop Dogg and Cheech and Chong were having the influence on my brother to smoke marijuana and commit crime. This is where it's really easy to get anti-Semitic, because Lou Adler was behind Cheech and Chong, despite how horrifically destructive marijuana is. I can cite so many things, but my experience with the internet is very few of you are genuinely interested in the truth. But this course, Criminal Justice, just going to quote the learning theory section. Gabriel Tarde was one of the first theorists to believe that crime was something learned by normal people as they adapted to other people and conditions of their environment. His theory was a product of his experience as a French lawyer and magistrate, and was described in the book Penal Philosophy, published in 1890. Reflecting the state of knowledge about the learning process in his day, Tarde viewed all social phenomena as the product of imitation. Through imitation or modeling, a person can learn new responses, such as criminal behavior, by observing others without performing any overt act or receiving direct reinforcement or reward. The first 20th century criminologists forcefully argue that criminal behavior was learned was Edwin H. Sutherland. His theory of differential association, developed between 1934 and 1947, was that persons who became criminal do so because of contacts with criminal definitions and isolation from non-criminal definitions, together with its more recent modifications. His theory remains one of the most influential theories of crime causation. The 9 propositions theories, I can't show that table. Borrowing a premise from the theory of the Chicago School, Sutherland maintained differential associations would not produce criminality if it were not for differential social organization. In other words, the degree to which communities promote or inhibit criminal associations varies with the way or the degree to which they are organized. Since its final formulation in 1947, modifications and additions have been made to Sutherland's theory as new developments in learning theory have emerged. For example, Daniel Glasser modified Sutherland's theory by introducing role theory, and by arguing that criminal behavior could be learned by identifying with criminal roles and not just by associating with criminals. Thus, a person could imitate the behavior of a drug dealer without actually having met one. Glasser obviously believed that the media had a greater influence on learning of criminal behavior than Sutherland believed they had. Robert L. Burgess and Ronald L. Akers, as well as C. Ray Jeffrey, adopted the principles of operant conditioning and behavior modification developed by B. F. Skinner, and the principles of modeling, as developed by Albert Bandura, to the explanation of criminal behavior. Burgess, Akers, and Jeffrey integrated psychological concepts with sociological ones. Although they referred to their theories by different names, we will use the more general term learning theory. So this whole time, the government has known that I was right. It even gets worse if you look at the FBI assailant mindset report of 2016, but this just proved me right with that timeline analysis. So Snoop Dogg, Cheech and Chong, Sir Mix-a-Lot, all those things. Currently, I have this recent psychological observation that the electronic devices are faceting the minds of children more than their own parents. Children are learning more through their, smartphones than they are from their own parents. The smartphones are, cultivating and controlling the psychological development of children to be pro-LGBT, pro-desegregation, just whatever the elites want from Silicon Valley. They use social media for social engineering, including social media, including advertising, social engineering through advertising. And I can cite a ton of sources on that. I can cite a bunch of personal experiences, but back in the 5th grade, it was just the old television and landlines. Excuse me. Just ate bean burritos for lunch. Bean and beef with chili. So it's insane to me to know that this entire time I was right, and the government has known I was right, and this changed nothing. It's not like there's someone I can call and say, oh, hey, the government's corrupt, there, and so are corporations, right? Who was it that opened these studios in Southern California that recorded Snoop Dogg, that filmed Cheech and Chong, that filmed Sir Mix-a-Lot's videos, and then printed them or, recorded them onto cassette tapes, VHS tapes, compact discs, and disseminated the data across, interstate freeways, to warehouses, to stores, to your home. But those are the people who are socially engineered a moral decline in the United States, and pornography and marijuana are a big part of that, including soft pornography in Hollywood. And none of these people will ever be held accountable. It's even worse now with social media. YouTube, Facebook, 9gag, you name it. Any social media site is very corrupt. And I keep catching signs of the corruption. I posted some anti-marijuana image and I got a 22-hour image ban. And it wasn't unfactual. It was the FBI's 2016 Assailant Mindset Report, where a ton of law enforcement agencies have been saying that the decriminalization of marijuana is causing violent criminals to be released early when they otherwise would have been locked up longer, and these same criminals who were arrested on drug charges that are released end up committing homicides. Like Darrell Brooks, there's a few other ones, right? And this is what the Liberty University is pushing, is criminal justice reform. And so just like the rabbis, who are very liberal, they're also trying to brainwash me to be accepting of this immorality. It's very immoral. The whole Black Lives Matter thing, I mean, some of you might say, well, how could that possibly be immoral? These are just good, innocent people. The cause of black crime is the victims of black crime. It's the victim's fault, right? So EcoMap Tech CEO Pava Marie Lepere, a self-described anti-racist and BLM supporter who spoke out against the criminalization of black bodies, was allegedly beaten to death in her own home in Baltimore by a black male who was released early from prison. They are clearly under the influence of marijuana. The Waukesha, Darrell Brooks incident, the Bail Project, let him out early. He was also high on marijuana, etc., etc., etc. So then I had this thought of, well, why not let them brainwash me? Why not just allow it to happen? I could see what they're doing. I'm also taking an introduction to research course, which has me reading the 7th edition American Publication Manual, right? American Psychological Association Publication Manual. And so this is actually causing like a neuroscience, like brain structural changes, because it's so much data, so thick and overworded and heavily worded, and This is they're cultivating a vulnerability in my mind of neuroplasticity to change the way I think about marijuana and other things. And I caught them doing it. I'm not a moron. And I asked a professor about it, and he lied. I said, "Oh, there was clearly a plug for marijuana in here." He said, "Oh no, that was just a, example of how you're going to cite the sources." And I got full shit. So both professors, all these professors are lying to me as Christians, right? The other one, the criminal justice, I pointed out all those things about how criminal justice reform has had a very negative impact. And also, COVID quarantine was a very good example of what do you do when the laws of man force you to go against the laws of God, right? Back then I was Christian, and the COVID quarantine laws were forcing people to go against the laws of Christianity, like no churches, blah, blah, blah. And instead of giving me a honest answer, she just said, "A worldwide pandemic caused the world to look at the racism of the police killing all the black people." And I'm thinking, this is a professor. This is a woman who is a college professor and I think a lawyer. What? And then she said that the officers were using violence against, fellow members of the Christian church. And I'm like, no, dude, you can't just assume all blacks are Christians because they were killed by police. You can't assume blacks didn't deserve it. You can't assume, just because he's black, obviously the police are racist. Yeah, with Ryan Carson, the black guy had a knife and stabbed the shit out of Ryan Carson, even though he was a huge BLM supporter, and killed him in the street. And there's no police. The defund police went to refund the police very fast because of the rise in violent crime in at least 7 major cities. And Google this yourself. Democrats are being carjacked, victimized, violent crimes, etc. So I thought, well, why not let them brainwash me? Right? Because it did feel good. It felt like maybe they were making it so secondhand marijuana wouldn't set off my schizophrenia. Which is insane to me. I could tell this to Christians till I'm blue in the face, or atheists, or Jews, and there's been rabbis who are the only ones smart enough to actually say, okay, this makes sense. Christians are like, Jesus will fucking excuse my language, Jesus will magically make it not happen. He'll make the reality go away. And Jews, kind of the same thing. Not all of them. But it's a very simple thing. Secondhand marijuana sets off my schizophrenia, so it causes hallucinations, suicidal, homicidal thoughts, voices in my head, etc. I'm not the only one affected negatively by this. There is a lot of data on the rise in cannabis-induced psychosis incidents like homicides, suicides, vehicular fatalities, homelessness, welfare dependence, etc. So it's frustrating that there's no one I can call again and say, hey, the professors lied to me, the government is lying to me. Can't someone do something about this? Do corporations have more power in the United States from Silicon Valley than the government does? Or is the government the corporations? Like, are they the same thing? Shouldn't there be somebody I can call to, check that and force the government to be accountable and force these corporations and university professors, etc.? But it was appealing to think because it felt like the brainwashing was making it so the secondhand marijuana didn't affect me. Like there was some sort of magic, right? So I could be like other friends that I've had who are just fine in legalization and, not just fine, but thriving fairly well in comparison to enduring it while suffering from it. But then I thought Ryan Carson was brainwashed. He's probably read the American Psychological Association manual. And so is the other woman who was murdered by the Black Lives Matter guys, even though she supported Black Lives Matter. And Ava Marie Lapierre, etc. And so then I'm thinking, I probably shouldn't let them brainwash me into accepting all these things. Because with the marijuana legalization, then it means I accept diversity, racial integration, multiculturalism, and all these things that have a clear and distinct harmful and destructive influence. And even with all those things aside, for those of you who just say weed and rap music, right? Cheech and Chong, Snoop Dogg are fine. How many black people do you think murdered other black people while listening to rap music and smoking weed? Specifically Snoop Dogg, but other rap as well.